Hey guys, welcome back. Well, as you can see, we're moving along. Before we go too far, I want to show you this drawer. I want you to take a look real carefully right here at this applied front and our through dovetails. You just cannot tell that that's not a half-blind dovetail. We think rock star status, huh? Well, hopefully the sound is much improved. We'll see. And hopefully you'll get it in stereo. Y'all hold on. Okay. Next step is the doors. Now, I've gone ahead and actually made my doors. But I'm going to show you how we did it. I wanted something that gave me a good visual reference. Now, the first thing when we're making these, there's a couple issues. Number one is there's a question of, do you make the doors to fit tight to the opening and then come back and trim them to fit? Or do you glue up and make the doors already trimmed and fit them? My choice is to do exactly what I've done. I'll make them tight to the opening or snug, and then I can come back and trim. And in a little bit, we'll see why I like that technique. Now, we're going to do these with a set of cope and stick bits or railing style, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to show you exactly every move we made. One of the things we have to do, and if you remember on the storyboard, when we were working on our storyboard, one of the things, let me get the storyboard real quick. Let's look at this. I already see a mistake I wrote on here for you. The bottom of the door, get this up here. The bottom of the door is 2 3/4. A 1-inch mullion, 1-inch mullion, and then the top, we've got it listed as 2 1/4. But actually what I worked with from this point to this point, which would be my wide point in here, when I started out, I had this at 5 inches. So my whole piece through here to cut the tenons is a full 5. That gave me room to do my design and figure out what I wanted and how I wanted it. Now, this is kind of where you have to suit yourself, if you will. What I do is I just kind of did a little reverse cut. Puts me kind of narrow up here. Now we had it listed as 2 1/4 because the initial thinking is that this point would be 2 1/4 inches from the top to the bottom of it. But when I started doing that, it didn't look good. I didn't like it because it came across here just too straight. And I've got plenty of material. I'm about 1.5 inches there, so. But we'll look at drawing that out and figuring that one out. And also making the little angle right here for our center divider. Now to keep us all talking on the same level, because I'm going to be honest with you, I will mess this up in a heartbeat. After all these years, I still confuse a style and a rail. So I wrote it on there. And I hope I wrote it right. And if I didn't, oh well. Just think of it in reverse. So rail, runs, style is vertical. All right. You see this isn't glued together. We're going to use this. Down here you can see I've got my material laid out for my raised panels. Now we're going to look at this. This is actually a resawn piece of 8/4. And I realize not many is going to be able to do that. So be very selective when you do that and remember that chatoyance thing. Now, the other thing I did is, as you remember, we already had the outside of the case sanded. So once I had my doors made, I went through and I sanded all the face. And right now the dye is dry, so it's kind of hard to see everything. But that Chatoyance thing, we have everything working. Everything is showing up as it should. I wanted to double check and make sure I had that right before I glue this up, because then it's a little hard to do anything about. Okay, what we're going to do is now get another camera angle, and we're going to come back and see how we made the doors. All right, guys, cope and stick. Most of your first thing you got to remember when you're doing your measurements and everything is that you got to allow for your tenons. The majority of your cope and stick bits use 3/8 tenon on each end. So on your rails, you need to add 3/4 of an inch. But check your bit set. Here's a set from CMT that's 7/16. So be sure to check it. Now let's look at the cope and stick real quick. One cuts the beaded part, or whatever profile you're using, on the side and plows out the mortise. The one we're using is what's called just a round over. It's just a rounded, kind of forms a little bead. The other one, that's the cope bit, and it cuts the mating tenon on the end. Now, you're going to have to fiddle a little bit and work with them to make sure everything fits just right. You want a nice flat surface. Now, the doors material I'm using is actually about 15/16, which is a little thick. But I also know I'm fortunate enough I have a drum sander. So I know that I can put my doors together and slide it through the drum sander and just clean and level everything up real nice. You can't do that with a planer. So it don't work. You're going to tear your doors all to pieces. So a typical rail and style set will only cut up to 7/8. And even then 7/8 is pushing it a little bit. So bear that in mind. Because, you know, if you're going to make your face frame heavy, then think about your rail and stiles before you get too far. So 3/4 to 7/8 is typically where the cope and stick bits work, or rail and stile cutters, they're called both. So make sure you adjust your material to that. Now, you got to set them up. And that is, you got to get your heights and all level. Now again, I'm very fortunate. My router table, I've got 2 routers in it. So I'm going to be running the cope bit in one, the stick bit in another. You probably don't have that luxury. You probably have one router. So be careful and make sure that, you know, when you get going, set yourself up some patterns. Now, Eagle America sells, and I don't know what I did exactly with my other little mate, but they sell these setup blocks. They're not very expensive. And you can use them to set your bits. Now, what did I do to allow me to be able to cut my tenons? That's the issue, to be able to cut my tenon on that thick of wood. Well, here's what I did. Some of the manufacturers, you can actually buy a secondary cutter or another cutter, the straight cutter right here. This, and I realize you're probably not going to do this, but while we're here, I'm going to show it to you. You can usually buy one. It's the one that does the straight, doesn't have any profile to it. But what I did, I've got another profiled set. It's a different profile, but they're all identically the same size. So what I did was I just simply stole one of the cutters off of it, and I've got it over here. That's why I've got it stacked. And I wanted you to understand that's why I did that. Now, in cutting your copes or your tenons, there's a lot of different ways. Typically what I will do is I just simply use a miter gauge. Set up, let me move this table. You see that okay? I got more junk here because I got to show you. I just use a miter gauge. Okay. The other thing you can do, this is one Eagle makes. Pinnacle's got a really nice one, nice big heavy aluminum, and it's called a coping slit. And essentially what happens is everything goes in, gets clamped into place, and you just push it through. But I already know a lot of you don't have a miter slide in your in your router table. You really need to consider that. They really help a lot. In the event you don't. Now this is a piece of 3/4 MDF. Half would probably be better. But you want something that's nice and flat and true. And you would have to elevate this bit above the platform that you're using. But to set up a fence, just like we have, and put you a backer on it, or a fence, it's something that you can use just to be able to, now I'm going to hit this, but you wouldn't be because it would be up above, and it may even make a little notch in the bottom. But to take this and just use this as a straight edge gauge to push it through, you could do very easily. To get you a little toggle clamp like this and mount it to the face of this to where you can put it in and lock it down, that would be a good thing too. The only suggestion I would give you is to make sure you make your fence tall enough, okay, so that you can bump into it, so that it's a guide for you. To understand that, let me show you very quickly. When I've got my miter gauge in here, I can come right up to my fence. Now, remember when we was running some of the small moldings and things, I took a Forstner bit and I drilled a hole in the MDF just enough to get my bit in. Now the reason for that is that, I'm going to move this around a little bit more. Crystal, can they see this right here? Is that I want as much bearing surface right here as I can get. Now this cutout ain't got nothing to do with nothing. It's just another setup we used. But what happens is when I come through here, when I engage this, I'm wide enough, I'm not going to rock in it. You understand what I'm telling you? Let's take a look real quick. I didn't rock, I got a clean cut, and as you can see, I'm still pushing a little bit on cutting that all the way. Now, the issue is when I get into the small mullions, they're 1 inch wide, and we're going to cut them a little wider to start with, but when I get right here, I can actually slam into that bit. There's a bearing in here, right here in the center, that prevents me from being able to go all the way in. But a simple way to handle that, because it's narrow, is just a clamp, come up to your fence. Now when you're setting this up, take a straight edge. Take a straight edge and set your fence right against the bearing. Okay? Keep it So you don't have any way of scooting in or moving. But when you set this up, bring this in tight, and just simply take a clamp and lock it down. It's exactly what we're going to be doing. No issue. Now, you notice I've got my fence on my miter gauge all the way up. This is giving me a backer to prevent chip out. But when you're running your pieces to take something and put in behind it to give you a backer is going to keep you from getting any chip out on the backside. Now, if you got to listen carefully to this. If you're running, let's just do it. Let's don't talk about it. Let's do it. I'm going to go over here and cut me a stick real quick. Okay, here's a stick. And we've already cut our cope. My issue is that everything on, now first of all, everything runs with the face, what's going to be your premier surface, your face side down, always down. If I'm running this, the rotation of this bit coming into the area that I've already I've already ran the profile on, it's going to chip me out right here. It's going to tear this up. How do I prevent that? Very simple. What you want to do is take yourself a scrap, same thickness, and run what we'll call a stick on the cope cutter. I know that sounds nuts. Watch. Now this is too narrow and I didn't have a stick, so I didn't go all the way down. So let me just get a piece of it real quick. All right. I think I got a blade getting ready to give me an issue. What I do is I make the cope in a length that will fit into I'm a little snug on this. Anyway, this fits in so that when I run it, I'm awful snug on that. It'll do. This goes all the way in. That's what it's supposed to do. Anyway, so that when you run it and put the edge of it right to the edge of your tenon or out to the end, back, or you can be back a little bit, because the object of the game is that when this goes through, what it's going to do is it's going to fill this and make that a solid cut so that you can't chip out. It's going to back that cope cut up. The stick cut up. Got that? Now, this is too tight. So what do? Well, where's the one we took apart? Right here. What you can do, if you look inside, if it's too tight, what happens is, see this one, the cutter is right in here. What happens is you can take this apart. And inside of here, you're going to see little teeny thin shims. See them? And you'll see some little thin washers of different thicknesses. And what you have to do is you have to shim your cutters to give you the correct tenon. Normally when you first buy them, they're usually pretty good. But if they're off a little bit, usually on the top, when you take this nut off, underneath there will be some spare shims. Yep. I don't know if Crystal can get in close enough. You can see there's 2 there. And you see the little teeny space between the cutter. See right here, the space between the cutter right there? That's where it's shimmed. Okay? So common sense says, you know, if I need that to be tighter, then I just need to, you know, remove a shim. If I need it to be wider, I need to add one. That's the way they work. So if you go buy a set of cutters, or if you have them sharpened, okay, be careful when you have them sharpened. I've told you many times that the best thing to do is just get you a diamond hone, take a little, you know, goof off or something, and just keep them honed. Because when you sharpen them, what they do is if you notice this carbide right here is on an angle. You see that? It's always angled back. See it here? This don't go straight across. So what they do is they grind the face of this, and what it does, it diminishes it slightly diminishes the length of the cut. And if they're not really good at it, and they just get in there and grind it, then what happens is you wind up with a set of mismatched profiles that don't work real good. If you keep them honed up, they last a long, long, long time. I definitely prefer honing. Okay. Now, here's the other issue. What I like to do is I like to cut all my copes first. Simply because of that tear out thing. Okay? So what I like to do, the first thing I did on the corner cabinet was I ran all my stiles. This is where this works well for me, but again, I got 2 routers. I cut all my stiles first so that I had something to fit to. Then I came back, set them in my case, got all my measurements, and then I came back and did the cope on my cross pieces, on my rails. That way I didn't have an issue with tear out. Because then when I came back and cut the other stick part, I would remove any tear out. Plus I also always leave your rails and stiles wider than what you need, so you can trim off any tear out, and we're going to go look at that just in a second. So I'm going to run a piece here that we're going to use to make the top, and some mullion pieces, and we're going to see how we did all that. All right, this is what we'll refer to as my stick bit. That's what's going to cut this rounded profile. Now, when you get into this tiger maple, and a lot of times, no matter which one you get into, you're going to wind up with some tear out. Now, like I told you, we always run this face down. Don't forget that. Ooh, I got that fitting good, don't I? There we go. And again, with a straight edge, you see my fence set up. Make sure that you're set right to the to the bearing. Okay, and run it. Now the question comes in, do you set it up, run it a little bit, to sneak up on the thing? I'll be honest, I usually hit them one shot. And I get some tear out. That's why we leave them wide. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the table saw and I'm going to skim this. Now in the case of the corner cabinet, what we did was I needed everything at 2 1/4. So I left everything, I pretty much milled everything to 2 1/2 to give me some trim room. Common sense says make sure your material for your door is straight and flat. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off about 1/8 of an inch. Maybe not quite. Now, back to the router table for another pass. Now I'm nice and clean and smooth. This will be my stiles. Now, time to do the rails. All right, now I cut my copes. Now, I've cut this to show you, both of them to show you get a lot of dirt and dust and all that going on. I ain't trying to sell you something. This is one of those little Pinnacle freehand guards. Or you can rig you up one. But you want something in here that's going to give you some dust control, as well as shield you a little bit. This one's made to mount right into my plates, but as you can see, all I do is substitute a machine bolt just with a little screw and a washer, and I'm good. Now, this is going to be our fancy top. Now it should go without, I can't even tell you these are the same thicknesses. This is just some stuff I've grabbed. No, they're not, but it's okay. That's a little snug. How tight should it be? You should be able to take your hand and kind of knock it in there, but you don't want it loose. I like it snug enough it'll stay in place when I mount it. Now what we have to do, now this is where I was talking about using the backer piece. If you're cutting these and you've already cut your profile on your stick. If you already did this, you definitely want to have one of these backers to keep from getting chip out. Now at this stage of the game, this one's ready to go ahead and cut the bead in, or the stick. This one we have to shape. So let's go look at doing that. Okay, here's what I did. I found my center line. I have my center marked. Hope you can see that. It's just a pencil line. Okay. Then what I did is I kind of started looking at this. Now, what I came up with, this front point is 1.5 inches. My back point is right at 2.5. Now remember, you got a left and a right. So what I did was, and I cannot stress to you enough to be sure that you do a mock-up. In other words, build you, even once you've got everything done, take you some scrap and make you one of these and make sure it's looking like you want. Then I came in here, and with that dimension, I could measure it. I'm just going to go 1.5 inches. Now, the way I came up with mine was I just kind of sat here. I don't think I want one quite that big. I just kind of sat here and just kind of started sketching it a little bit, kind of roughened it in to where I thought it would look pretty good. Then I went to the bandsaw and I sawed it. Now I have one of those oscillating drum sanders. So once I got to this stage, I just bandsawed this out, then took my sander and just kind of smoothed all this up, and then I set it up in my door and said, yeah, I like that. That looks good. Wasn't hard. Okay? You got that? That's all I did. So don't complicate this, guys. Now, then here's what I came up with. Let me tap this together real quick. I'm going the wrong way. Turn it around. Need to pay attention to what I'm doing instead of what I'm going to do. That's one of the hard parts about filming. All right. So this is what I came up with. Now this is going to be my right door because I want my arc coming to the center. Now, we have to turn our focus on getting to the mullions. Before we do that, we've got to get this bead cut again, or this stick cut. So I'm going to go do that real quick, and then I'm going to show you what we did. I got a mistake, guys. Listen to them. I'm measuring the cabinet. I remember now. I'm at that 1.5 and 2.5. Add 3/8 to that. That was the beaded part. So the 1.5 and the 2.5 is actually going to be our finished front. So this is going to wind up being 1.5 and 3/8 is 1 7/8. I mean 1.5 and 3/8 is 1. This is going to be 1 7/8. This is 2.5 plus 3/8, so this winds up being 2 7/8. And the point I'm showing you I reference to was after the tenon cut is my long point, is my point from this point here and here to here. So we want to be 1 7/8, 2 7/8. So we get a finished after we do the cut, so that we wind up with the 1.5 and 2.5 after it's beaded. Got that? Okay. Now let me get set up and we'll do the mullions. Okay, guys, here comes a little bit of a tricky part. Our shaped piece that's up in the top, we got to route what would be our stick profile on it. Now, before we do this, I want to show you this. If you elect to cut your tenons after you've done your stick, when you're doing this part to cut the tenons, save the off-fall from where you cut it out and use it. Now this is longer, so this is not the exact off-fall, but keep it so that on this end you can go flat. When you do this side, you're going to have a flat surface. Now here's another thing you can do to handle what we're getting ready to do, and that is to keep yourself wider so that you have something to hold on to. Got that? I'm going to show you that. Now there's an issue that occurs. After the tenon's cut, when we come in here, if you look, see where this bearing is? This bearing is not going to allow, now this is just a piece of MDF for demonstration. This bearing is not going to have a bearing surface right here where this tenon is. And it's going to create us an issue. Let's take a look. Now this wasn't too bad, but notice what it did when we came off the bearing, when we came off of it, because there's nothing there's nothing to stop it. Okay, how do we handle that? Well, what I did, now the first thing you notice, this is a freehand routing and I've got a starter pin. The reason for that starter pin, it gives me something to get a good hold on and come in. Now I want you to look very carefully what I did. I took me 2 scrap pieces and I've cut them to give me a bearing surface. Okay, if you don't want to do that, and you also see what I did, because I got something to hold on to. You can rig it up any way you want. But the thing of it is if you're not going to do something like this, stop before you get all the way to the end. Then you can just take a little file or rasp and finish it out. Not that difficult. But all I did was make a call or put it in a tenon, went ahead and tenoned it in so that I could do it. Now, one of the cool things about the arc is that you usually, for whatever reason, you don't get a lot of tear out. Just go easy. But you can leave it a little bit fat or wide, cut close to your line, route it, then come back, sand it to the line, and rerun it. Just like we were doing, except that we've got to sand the profile. Got that? Here we go. Now, as you can see, I don't have any tear out in my ends. Okay, it worked nice. I just threw a staple in it. And that's another reason for making sure that your tenons are fitting snug. And we have a profile cut. And just to make sure you understood what I just told you, if you had bands, let's say you bandsaw this, say a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch from your line, now you would go back and either sand it to the line or have you a pattern made that you could use, like a spiral bit or something, and router cut it to the line, then run it again if you're having a tear out issue. Okay, now the same thing applies. If we leave this wider, you're going to be better off to actually put this in the door frame and clamp it together and then do a cross and then cut it instead of trying to cut this on the table saw. You can, but you got to index off this side to narrow it up. You got that? Crystal gave me one of them funny looks. If this was the table saw, I can draw it out and I can bring it in and I can make my cut, letting this piece go to the left of the blade instead of trying to rig it up and cut it this way. Got it, guys? Now what we have to do is we have to cut our vertical mullion to match this profile. Now, the first thing to do is make sure you're square. So what I did, this is my center line, and this piece is 1 1/4, and I've got a center line on that. All right, again, make sure you're square, and you can do that by measuring from one side to the other. Draw it on. Now, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to keep this piece a lot longer than what you're going to need, because you may have a little bit of trial and error here. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to the bandsaw and I'm going to saw that to the line. Then we're going to go back to the coat bit and we're going to coat it. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this guard because I need you to see this. All I'm going to do is I'm going to set this as close to my angle as I can. I'm good. Now here's what I want you to notice. We've got a sweep to this. Remember that bearing inside of there? It now becomes our friend. Watch. See it pull in? Did you see that pull in? Now here's my issue. Right here and right here, I'm touching a little bit. Now I realize how do you get past this stuff? So what I'm going to do is come back in. Stay right there. I'm going to get the piece and check my fit. Now, if I need to, you see what I did? I'm just dancing it. See what I look like here. All right, see I got a little too much gap. Now what I can do is I can just take a piece of sandpaper or a rasp and do this, do it again, until I've got a perfect fit. All right, just fiddle with it a little bit. Let me show you that. All right, so what I got to do is I got to take a little bit off. Now, I don't have to take it off up here. I only have to take it off the tenon a little bit. So I'll do it, test it, until I've got just what I want. Now this is now I'm going to explain this. This is an extreme. Normally on something like that, when you're making this sweep in here, if you come down and instead of turning it so much here, you kind of keep just a little angle here and then turn from that up. It's a lot easier to do. But we're not trying to do this show to do it easy. Okay, now this is just a bandsaw line. Now you can see right here, I've got a little bit of a gap there, so that means I'm tight on this end and I'm tight on that end. So all I got to do is just touch up a little bit on these ends and smooth up that tenon just a little bit. I go into this knowing it's going to take me two or three passes to get exactly what I want. Now the reason I'm smoothing up the tenon now instead of doing it before is now the only thing I got to do is that little 1/4 inch tenon. I don't have to work with the whole shooting match. Touch it up a little bit. All right, I'm in there good enough. I'm tight. Because here's the other thing that's going to happen, is we're going to be reducing the width of this. So in reality, it's just going to be very little up here that's going to be touching right in there. As long as we're pretty good, we're okay. Now what I want to do is I want to go and fit it to the bottom of it. So let's go do that. Okay, make sure everything's in, nice and square, as it should be. Fit it. Make sure you're nice and tight up here at the top. And usually that'll involve taking a clamp and pulling it, and make sure you're square and tight in here. Now you can measure all this. Then all I do is set this piece right to the edge of my door. Go across it. Make sure I'm square. Oops. Now I have to add for my tenon, which is 3/8 of an inch. Let me go cut that real quick. All right, now we're to the point, guys, we're going to be working with narrower pieces. You see the clamp? Got to be there. Remember when we did this end, you could see how the bit wanted to pull it in? It's going to do the same thing on these narrow ends. Okay? It can try, but now there again, that also says that's why you want that bearing dead in line with your fence. See, all we did here was we had our this is just a safety thing. We had our miter slide a little bit loose so that because of this space, so we could come in here, basically do the reverse of what we did over there when we cut the top rail, where we freeformed it. We're just doing this in a smaller area and making sure. I wouldn't want to do this like this. I just wouldn't. That's also the reason for cutting the tenon first. Okay, because that could give us an issue. If it did, just like we did the ends on the top rail, just like we put a piece in here, we would need to put a piece in here to keep us from getting tear out. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the stick part of this to 1.25 inches. Then I'm going to go to the table saw. I'm going to take an 1/8 inch off each side, and I'm going to run it again. So what I want you to see is me running this narrow piece again. All right. This is where this can get a little dicey because you're pretty close in here. And when we get to running those little short mullions, I want you to see my jig. All it is a piece of MDF. See the notch? See the stop? And all it does is it sits down over like this, okay, and I can put it through. Ready? Good to go. All right, fitted up a door. Now, you're going to notice something. I'm just a little bit short here. So that's the reason I'm telling you always do a mock-up to make sure you get it right. I could probably go ahead and go with this. And the reason is I'm going to be trimming it back to create my gaps when we finalize it. That gives us our basic door. Now comes another one of them fun things. Now, you may ask, well, couldn't you just go ahead and put a 2 1/4 piece across the top? Sure you could. Not an issue with that at all. If you do that, you kind of get a nice little country look. You know, this gives it a little bit more of a formal look, a little French look, whatever, French country. So, you know, it's all in what you want to do. And, you know, obviously, you know, just putting a straight piece across here is pretty straightforward. That's, you know, not difficult. But I wanted to do this. Number one, I like the look. And number two, we didn't start out doing this show to do all the easy stuff. So this is a way of doing this. Okay, now we get to do those wonderful little short, narrow cross pieces. Now they can look intimidating, but they're not. I'm actually going to go ahead and get one of the doors out of the cabinet. Everything don't fall apart on me here. Here we go. All right. You know, the hardest part about doing these is getting the length correct. Because if you get it too long in here, then you're trying to push your door apart. If you get it too short, you got gaps. Here's the quick, easy way to do it. take you some little pieces of just thin stock 1/4-inch plywood or whatever. I want you to watch this. Set it in. Put your center piece in. Put your other one in. And simply check to make sure that you're coming flush with the tenon at the top and that this is down tight. When you're flush here, you're good. You now have this length correct. Instead of wrestling the door around, is it wrestling or wrestling? Having to mess with the thing, you know. So it's just a little play in there to make sure you got everything just like you want, because it doesn't take much to get off. Okay, now once you have your length set, then we do it exactly like we did the center one, except we have to deal in shorter lengths. So what I'm going to do is I rip everything. I just rip some stock to 1 1/4. Now here's a hint. You're going to need 8 of them in this particular cabinet. Do 10 or 12. Because you can get a little chip out or tear out or whatever. You're not using a lot of material, so make sure you do some extras. Let's do a couple. Take a look at it. Now, before I do this, I imagine you noticed that on the other one, on the popper, I was having an issue getting this. It wasn't clearing my little dust collection thing, and that's just because that popper was a lot thicker. Same thing, we're using that jig again. Then it's off to the table saw. Take an 1/8 inch off each side. Get them down to 1 1 inch. Run them again. We're ready to go. That's how hard it is. Now let's look at gluing it up. All right, guys. Before we go too far, we're going to do a dry fit. Oops. Because this is the way we're going to need to glue this up. We're going to stack it. But that can get a little messy and it can get a little difficult. So we're going to look at a way of doing that so it's not quite so messy. And so we make sure we land where we need to. Get in there, boy. Just want to get together, get up to the case. This would probably be a lot easier laying down, but then you don't get to see me have to fiddle with it a lot. All right, forget it. We're going to the case. All right, and one of the things I did is I went through oh yeah, just so you know, let me give you a couple quick measurements. My cross piece in here with each one of these at 2 1/4 came in 13 3/8. My little cross piece here, it came in at 6 9/16. And my height here was about 36 1/8. What I can see, 36 1/16, 36 1/8. Again, that doesn't mean that's what yours is going to be. Okay, they can vary a little bit. So what I did is each one of these pieces, as we denoted out, these are 9 7/8. And that puts me, where I want to land in this is I want to wind up trying to get this shelf as close to centered behind this mullion as I can, and try to have these 4 panes of glass the same size. If I were doing a straight top, then I would try to do it to where, again, they were all the same. That's what we want. Now, you see these little sticks can make a big difference in getting everything in position. But we're in the case. So what can we do here? Here's what I like to do. I like to take, and I'm going to invent me a piece of glass. I'm just a little bit over 6 5/16. All right, I better get up here because that's not. All right, I'm just a little bit over 6 1/4. See, this one's just a little bit one way or the other because it can move in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take me some scrap pieces of plywood, 1/4 inch plywood, and I'm going to make me some windows, if you will, that are going to fit in this perimeter right here. Make sense? So I'm going to rip them. We'll be right back. Y'all know why I'm doing this? I had these stuck up in there and every one of them come falling, just like dominoes all over the place. Well, now that we're back on the camera, you get the point. Whole lot easier laying down than it is standing up. So, by making this up, when we go to put this together, this automatically keeps everything straight, flat, where we want it. We don't have any issues. Now, one of the things we're going to do before we glue it is we will come in here and we will mark us an alignment point. Okay? And we want to do that, and we want to try to keep our mullions oriented. And the reason for that is that when we've got this turned up and we start gluing, we don't want to be getting glue all over the place. And I know you're ready. I am too. But as fate has it, when we come back next time, that's when we glue them up. Now, to understand a little bit about what's going to happen, what we're going to do is after we've done this, then we're going to come in here with a rabbiting bit with a 3/8 inch cut depth. And that bearing on that rabbet is going to ride right along the edge of this bead. And we're going to rabbet out the back of that for our glass. Now, before you get too crazy in all of this, you need to check with your glass cutter to see if they're able to cut something like this. We're fortunate ours is. Then we're also going to have to, the other thing we're going to have to look at is how, when we rabbet this out, because the bit's round, each corner in the back will have a rounded area. You can chisel it out. There is an easier way, and I'm going to show that to you. But again, check with your glass company to see if he can do that. And you'll see more about that next time. All right, guys. We're getting there. Hang with us.